Today, we're looking at a purple ink by Caran Ultra Violet. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that if you're in a hurry, you can skip around. But if you got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then inked up this Pilot Metropolitan with a 1.0 stub, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. In order to standardize some of my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper for all of the inks. I do use other papers, and some of those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, a lot of shading spots throughout this writing, 4 seconds to dry. Medium is just a tad lighter than the stub with no than the extra fine. With no feather spread, halo sheen, a very nice shading in this writing, much better here, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both far left to far right do show some color variation. It's more obvious in the medium, just like we had in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, minor Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer spots of shading. The extra fine is a tad bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no real shading coming through, 7 seconds to dry. Medium is a tad bit darker than the extra fine, about the same that we're seeing in the stub. With no feather spread, halo sheen, you definitely see shading as a shade difference within this writing, 12 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine, the medium shows some color variation, the extra fine shows none, and that's what happened in the writing. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, does have some very nice shading. The extra fine is a tad bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some nice shading going on here, 5 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, a very nice shading again, 7 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both does show good color variation, and we got it. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see that this is a pure purple dye. A very distinct line has been formed immediately on the bottom, and this was put straight into water. So that's kind of surprising on a Caran ink. And you see the rest push its way up. Now the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And what I see is the line looks the same, less of this purple is pushing its way up, and there's a just tad bit of yellow that seems to be showing itself at the very top. Quite unusual. I was not expecting it. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I feel safe using it in a note-taking situation if I want to go back and highlight, because I don't see any blowout or loss of information. Now, water only took off a tiny bit from the very top. A lot of this ink is bonded with this paper. Pen flush is very much the same thing. However, it only took water for me to clean this out of my pen. It's a difference between how that ink is responding with paper versus the plastic of the pen. 1/3 bleach solution is breaking it down, but it is not completely removing it, but I did not need to use that to get it out of my pen. As far as viscosity or flow, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Caran Ultra Violet has a viscosity of 2.2, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Caran Ultra Violet has an average dry time of 7 seconds, and that has to do with how quickly it's bonding with the paper, as we saw in the chromatographies. Instead of finding inks that look like Caran Ultra Violet, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a nice gray, and I chose Krishna's pencil. The second writing sample is done on Nemesine, Northbooks, and Word paper. Here what we're looking at is Nemesine paper, or Nemesine, or however you'd like to pronounce it. But regardless, it has no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, a very nice shading shows up throughout this writing. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, a very nice shading again, truly stand out, 5 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, a very nice shading, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us good color variation left to right, and we get it. Obviously a nice shading ink. What about a more absorbent paper like Northbooks? Well, we get no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does give us a few spots of shading. You can specifically notice how the word over is much lighter than the word fox. It took 1 second to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen. It still gives us just pepperings of shading with 1 second to dry. The scrubbies don't really show a lot of color variation, although we get peppering throughout on the paper. And last up is Word notebooks. It's a pocket-sized notebook. It's not really meant for fountain pens. We don't get too much bleed. We do get minor ghosting, not something that would stop most people from using the back of the page, which makes that part good for use. The 1.1 has a lot of consistent tiny feathers all over it. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub. It has the same feathering all over it. It has no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub. It has that same consistent feathering all over it. All of this feathering, I would not want to use this ink on this paper. It does have some spread, little bit of spread. You see it in some areas, not in all areas. So I just said, yes, it has spread. No halo, no sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. Scrubby for both are showing us no color variation, and we're not getting it here. And that is all that I have for writing samples. So what do I think of Caran Ultra Violet? I do enjoy the shading that's given by this nice darker purple, and the writing is quite a bit lighter than the very dark tone that was given in the swab. So it's a great example again of how swabs can lie. What nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? A medium flow broad puts down a nice dark tone with some very good shading and shows why this ink is so good. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. Thanks for watching.